October 2nd, 2009. I was doing research on my laptop when my wife appeared behind me. "Do you remember hearing about the ghost train at Watson Station?" I asked her. She doesn't remember. I tell her that it was at a holiday party. One of my coworkers in another department used to live in our area and asked if we had heard any stories about Train 737. We hadn't. So he tells us that there was this big train crash in the 50s where Train 737 derailed at the station and a bunch of people were killed as a result. But the stories didn't stop there. He told us that people who live in that area have reported seeing Train 737 riding through the station. We both didn't think much of it at the time. To be fair, it was an open bar. Months later, my normal route to work had been rerouted due to construction, so I had to take a bus and walk a few blocks to get to my home. And on an adjacent street, I see the old train station, which is now shut down. It's abandoned and mostly used for tagging now. I've walked by it a few times and heard nothing. So I started doing my own research. There was report after report after report of Train 737 riding through the station. So one night, after a work event, I got to the area somewhere around 10:50. So I figure I'll humor myself and walk by the station. The area around the station was just as old and abandoned as the station itself. The entrance had been blocked off, but you could still see the stairs headed downwards towards the track. Right next to the station, a bridge overlooking the train tracks. I walked onto the bridge and stopped, looking at the tracks below. It was so silent. I waited for a few minutes. I was about to walk off when... It can't be, I thought. I peeked over the bridge. I didn't see anyone or anything. I went across the street to the other side. I didn't see anything there either. But as I looked out into the distance, in the dark, I could hear the whistle again, fading away. "That sounds creepy as hell," my wife said when I told her the next day. I thought so too. I showed her some of the information I found. You see, there was a steam engine, one of the last steam engines in Jersey, that crashed upon its approach to the station in 1958. The engineer was at fault due to being impaired by intoxication, because around that time, people weren't taking as many trains as they used to. Trying to compete with the popularity of cars and air travel, railroad companies merged to cut costs as well as getting rid of trains with low passenger rate. A lot of jobs were lost, and there was an increase in alcohol-related accidents. The train did not switch tracks in time and collided head-on with another train leaving the station. The engineers and conductors were killed immediately. A lot of people died. The train station was meant to reopen years later, but it never did. My research also found that there have been other reported sightings of the train at different stations too. I told my wife it was always late at night and on the 9th day of the month. "That's today," she said in excitement. Her reaction didn't surprise me, and in fact, she was even more pleased when I had said I had already called a babysitter for the night. We always cherished our date nights, even the unconventional ones. An hour later, the babysitter arrives. I told my son goodnight and closed his door. I lied to my wife and said that he was already sleeping. The station was only about 5 minutes away by foot. The entrance was blocked off by a chain and a no trespassing sign. I stepped over it and walked down to the platform. It was eerily quiet. My wife appeared right next to me. She was beginning to get sketched out. To be honest, I wasn't afraid. If anything, I would be more worried about human threats, but she was there with me. I knew we were in the right place. And before I knew it, 20 minutes had passed. Then I heard it. It was quiet at first, and started to get louder. I could hear the shaking of the tracks. I could even feel it on the platform. I kept looking into the darkness until... No way, my wife said. Emerging out of the darkness, a steam engine was heading right towards us. It wasn't until this moment that I realized there was no plan of action for this. What were we supposed to do? What if the train crashed like it did decades earlier? As the train pulled into the station, to my relief, it didn't crash. In fact, it slowed down. As the front of the train passed us, I couldn't see the driver, but I could see the train number, 737. It finally came to a complete stop. It was the train, all right. The amazement began to fade into dread when I looked into the passenger windows and saw people sitting in the seats. They were all looking ahead, almost frozen in time, dressed in old-fashioned attire. The train door opened. We watched as a pale man in a conductor's outfit step out. I didn't know what to do. Not because it was my first time seeing a ghost, but because of the name I saw on his jacket pocket. A name I saw repeatedly in my research. Thompson, the conductor of 737. It was greatly believed that the conductor, Edward Thompson, had been the actual reason for the crash, and while the other souls were able to pass on, he was forced to remain on the train, transporting souls to their destination. We'll catch the next one? My wife said nervously. Thompson suddenly turned his attention towards us. He was looking directly at my wife, smirks at her, and says, "I'm sorry, miss. You are already late." He steps aside, waves his hand towards the train, welcoming her in. She looks at me, puzzled. I had tried so many times to tell her. No matter what I did, she couldn't remember. She couldn't remember the accident. She couldn't remember the coma. She didn't know we had a funeral. And she didn't know that our son slept in our bed with me for 6 months because he was too afraid to see mommy walking around at night. And after seeing that train, she finally understood what it was. We both did. And I knew right there that this was going to be the last time I saw my wife. I watched as she walked towards the conductor. But something came over her. She walked back up to me, slowly raised her hand, and wiped a tear from my cheek, and I held her hand there for a moment before she let go. I didn't want her to let go. Then, I watched my wife get on that train. Thompson gave me a nod and followed behind her. I watched her sit in an empty seat, and then the train began to move again. And I watched the train move down the track until it disappeared into the darkness. I never saw the train again. And I don't know if it's in my head, but after all these years, sometimes when I pass the old Watson station, I can still hear in the distance the sound of train 737.